All right, hey guys, what is happening? What a beautiful day. It's probably like 60, 65 degrees out today, and I'm in the woods, so practicing a little social distancing. Man, what a beautiful day. I'm out here in one of my favorite spots, just overlooking this little creek that comes out of the side of the hill. And I want to share with you out of a couple of my favorite chapters in the Bible. It's the book of Hebrews. These verses at different times in my life have been just super encouraging, reminding me that Jesus really does have everything in control. God has a plan and a purpose regardless of what my circumstances may be in any given moment, that God does love me and that He cares and that He's got a plan and a purpose. And so Hebrews 10, verse 38 and 39 really is kind of my life verse. It's the verse that I really want to characterize my life. And in those moments when it's really difficult to follow Jesus or to do the right thing, that I just continually come back to this, and I'm reminded of this. And it says, "But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, I have no pleasure in him." Verse 39, "But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and are saved." And I absolutely love that. The writer of Hebrews is talking to a group of people who had become followers of Jesus. And in their culture, that was not a very popular decision. In fact, a lot of people were being persecuted and mistreated, maybe disowned by family because of their faith in Jesus. Oftentimes not a very popular decision. And he's just encouraging them and reminding them that, hey, we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and are saved. And then that's Hebrews 10, and then the next verse spills over, and it's Hebrews chapter 11. And Hebrews 11 is the great, heroes of the faith chapter. I remember as a kid growing up and just listening to some of the Bible stories like David and Goliath, right? And Samson and Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Gideon with 300 men defeating just a massive army. And over there's these big moments where it just seems like the miraculous happens, and God comes through and God uses individuals in such a mighty way. And I believe that miracles still happen, but I don't know about you. In my life, there's a lot of times where I'm going through something, I'm struggling, and it just doesn't seem like God is coming through in the way that I hoped or expected or think that He should come through. And so I think the writer of Hebrews is addressing this. He starts out chapter 11 by saying, "For now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the certainty of things not yet seen." And he says, for by it the people of old lived and were commended for their faith. And so he goes on and he describes Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and some of these amazing things through Joshua and Gideon and Barak and Samson, David, and they all just had just incredible moments where God came through, and it was just absolutely amazing. It was miraculous, and people were just in awe and wonder. And I think those are the people that oftentimes get a lot of the airtime, in church. We read about those stories because they're absolutely phenomenal. But that's not really the point that the writer of Hebrews is trying to make here in this moment. What he's saying is that God does work in those ways, and then there are times that you look and you watch and you see, and it is beyond question that God did this. But in verse 36, it kind of turns a corner. And it says, God does work that way. He does amazing and miraculous things on occasion. But verse 36, look at what it says. It says, others. There were others who suffered mocking and flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed by the sword. They went around in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They went around wandering in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And he says, remember that, there were some just great, incredible experiences where God came through in miraculous ways, but there were other times that God didn't come through in the way that as human beings we oftentimes just want Him to come through. And yet it wasn't because God didn't care. It wasn't because God was distant. It wasn't because God was just unaware. And it wasn't because those were His special people and you're not special. In fact, he goes on and he says, all of these, like all of the people, even the ones that got their name in the book, the ones that didn't get their name in the book, the others that we just like, nobody will ever know, at least on this side of eternity. They'll never know what happened and what they experienced and what the pain and the suffering that they went through, right? He says all of them were commended for their faith. Some of them did not receive what had been promised. Like, how do you merge those two concepts? Because there's a promise that God has, right? But then it says these people lived by faith, but they didn't receive what God had promised. That doesn't seem fair, right? And I know so many times in my life I'm like, that just is not fair. And the truth is, and the reality is, life is not fair. Like, we want it to be fair, especially when it comes to us. And then when it pertains to somebody else, we don't necessarily care if it's fair. We just want it to be fair as it pertains to us, right? But he said, these did not receive what was promised because, or since, God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. So what he's saying is that even though God didn't come through in such big and miraculous and amazing ways, that was still part of God's plan, right? And you, when you're going through things and it doesn't seem like God is coming through the way that you expect him to come through, like, he's got a plan and he's got a purpose for it, right? And he says it's not about your story. It's not about your life. When people look back on eternity, it's not about you and your name being big. It's about God and his name being big. It's about you playing the part that God has in store for you to play as it relates or as it pertains to all of history, because this is all about God's story, right? And ultimately, we, as those of us who have decided to become followers of Jesus, get to live in eternity with him. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But he says this. He goes on in chapter 12. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw aside every weight and every sin that clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race set before us. Your race. It might not seem fair compared to other people, but the race that God marked out for you, right? And since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all of those who have gone on before, right? That's who he's talking about, and that's who he's describing. So, since we're surrounded by all of those people who have gone on generation upon generation, he says we need to look to Jesus. Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and now is seated at the right hand of God. And it's absolutely amazing. It brings us back to the gospel. Like, God sent Jesus to the cross, and it was a moment filled with just pain and suffering. It was horrific, and it was just ugly, and it was nasty. And there was a moment before Jesus went to the cross that he was in the Garden of Gethsemane with his followers, with his disciples, and he began to pray, and he said, if there's any way that this cup can be taken from me, if there's any way out for this, yet not my will, but yours be done. And Jesus went to the cross knowing that in the midst of that pain and suffering, that God had a better plan, that this was all part of God's big, grand plan. And so he willingly went to the cross. And I believe, as I read throughout the pages of the Bible, that it tells us that those of us who put our trust in Jesus and what Jesus did on the cross, that there was something bigger than just one man dying for an idea or a cause, that actually Jesus would die, and his death paid the sacrifice or the penalty for our sin. I just wanted to share that encouragement with you today, because there's so many times in my life where I'm just like overwhelmed, or I'm frustrated because it just doesn't seem like God is coming through, right? And in the moment, we don't know what God's big grand plan is. And there may be some things that are so tragic and so horrific that we may never know on this side of eternity why those were allowed to happen. But I know in my own life that there are so many times where I look back on different circumstances that I thought were negative in the moment. And now I'm just so thankful for, because God used them in some pretty amazing ways in my life. Oh yeah. You can't go out in the woods without venison chops here. So this is from one of the deer I got. This last fall. Oh yeah, that looks scrumptious. Oh man. Oh yeah. Ah, haha. I am looking so forward to eating this. Oh man, perfectly done. Oh, yeah. Mm. Hey guys, Justin Van Ferrari here, Waypoint Preacher Man. I'm going to finish this up and head out, but thank you so much for journeying with me and checking out this video. My hope and my prayer for you is that in the midst of pain, in the midst of just crazy circumstances, you'll be able to look to Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. That'll be encouraging, and that it would just be the confidence you need to know that you are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and are saved. So have a good one. We'll see you next time.